Well, undoubtedly, one of the most important questions and one of the most frequent questions that I get on this YouTube channel is what is the best systematic theology to get? And I understand that question because a lot of people are on limited or fixed budgets. You can't just buy every book that's out there, though most of us who watch this channel probably would wish we could buy every book that is out there. But nevertheless, we're constrained by budgetary restrictions to try to get the best books possible. And even if you did have the money to buy all the books in the world, you'd still have the problem of which ones are going to be your go-to books in order to study particular topics. Let's say you're interested in researching justification. Well, who do you go to read about justification? All of them? Maybe so, maybe not. Maybe you might want to delve into one particular theologian more than others. For me, systematic theologies are a lot like sushi in that I want to try everything. I want to have everything on my plate. I'm ready to go for it. I'm ready to dig in. But nevertheless, there are my favorites that I'm going to go back to time and time again. And so in this video, what I want to do is analyze the question of what is the best systematic theology. And we're going to do it scientifically, and we're going to do it in a very fun way, which is to say we're going to have a good old-fashioned tournament. That's right. I'm going to set up the brackets. We're going to have a tournament to decide which systematic theology is the best. And by the way, I'm going to post a link to all of these systematic theologies in the description of this video so that you can go and grab them on Amazon if you'd like to. And you can at least banter with me in the comments as to whether or not you think that I got it right. What I'm going to do is set the tournament up a little bit randomly, by the way, as well. So I did not seed this tournament so as to favor anybody, but we're going to get into that as we go. Now, before we do that, I do want to mention one partner to this YouTube channel, which is Biblingo. You know, you strike me as the kind of person that might want to learn the biblical languages of Greek and Hebrew, given that you're watching a video right now about systematic theologies. So you're pretty nerdy and geeky as it relates to deep study, I would imagine, right? Well, if you want to learn Greek and Hebrew, but you don't have time to go to seminary or can't afford it, Biblingo is a wonderful way to do that. It's an app that you can get on your phone or you can do it on your desktop. It'll teach you everything about Greek and Hebrew, starting with the letters and their sounds and how to make words, but it's going to do it in a very natural way to learn languages. I'm going to post a link to Biblingo in the description of this video as well as a discount code that you can get it right here from my channel. One of my partners, Biblingo, thanks to them for supporting me. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into the tournament. This is going to be really fun today. So I'm going to set this up like a regular tournament bracket. And let's go ahead and introduce the principals in this tournament. We've got John Calvin up here in the top. We've got a play-in game too. By the way, sometimes they do that in like the NCAAs. They give kind of a wild card an opportunity to get there on the ground floor and get in on the first round. So we're going to do that. We've got Gerhardus Voss's Reformed Dogmatics. We've got Bavinck's Reformed Dogmatics. We've got Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology, John Frame's Systematic Theology. We've got Charles Hodge's 3-volume set. We've got Turretin's Elenctic Theology. We got Edwards in the History of Redemption, Burkhoff and his Systematic Theology, Michael Horton's The Christian Faith, Petrus Van Maastricht's Practical Theoretical Theology, Beeke's Reformed Systematic Set, an excellent set, A. Hodge's Evangelical Theology, William Ames's The Marrow of Theology, and John Murray's Works, volumes 1 through 4. So that's the tournament bracket. Again, I did not seed these books. They're just going to have to go at it in somewhat random order, and we're going to find out who's going to win. I think it's going to be a great tournament, and I'm excited to see who's going to win myself, though I already know since I set this up myself. All right, let's talk about that play-in game, right? So this would be like a wild card. This would be somebody that you might not think of to get into the tournament right away, but nevertheless, we're going to give a few outsiders a little bit of a chance to get into the tournament on the ground floor. So I'm going to put in here Joel Beeke's Puritan Theology. Now, this is a really cool book because Joel Beeke in his Puritan theology, though it's not Beeke's own theology necessarily, and by the way, Beeke's the only contestant that has 2 books in this tournament, so there's a little bit of an anomaly there. Yet each chapter is written from the perspective of the Puritans and often focuses on one particular Puritan, such as Matthew Henry. He's going to go up against Robert Letham's Systematic Theology, sort of a new one, a new kid on the block. Millard Erickson's Christian Theology, which I read when I was in college. And how about this? Let's throw in some R.L. Dabney in the first round of this play-in tournament. His Systematic Theology here, not appreciated by many, perhaps because of his Southern views at the time of the Civil War, but I think he's worth worthy of getting in a play-in shot here. So first round, definitely going to be Puritan theology for me. Honestly, I don't know a lot about Robert Letham, so this is kind of unfair. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's a hidden gem. Maybe you should go check that one out right away. But for me, Puritan theology is going to be better than that. And as it relates to the second matchup here, though I did read Millard Erickson to some benefit while I was in college, there were two textbooks that we used at Malone. Now, we were not a distinctly reformed school, though I did learn a lot of reformed theology while I was there, interestingly enough. But Millard Erickson and Wayne Grudem, who's going to show up later, those are the two theology books that we bounce back and forth with here. But honestly, R.L. Dabney has a really strong reputation as a Southern Reformed theologian. If you're looking for sort of the Southern Presbyterian, Southern Reformed view in the 19th century, then R.L. Dabney is definitely going to be your guy. Now, does he hold some controversial views? Perhaps. After all, the South lost the Civil War. And so some of his work has fallen out of favor, and some have even accused him of racism because of his views in those days. But he's not going to make it through this round because, for me, the one who's going to make it into the play-in is going to be Joel Beeke's A Puritan Theology, Doctrine for Life. Beeke, by the way, always has something of a co-author, and here it's Mark Jones, who is a notable Puritan scholar himself, and I like this book just enough to go ahead and put it into the main tournament bracket. So let's get back to that main tournament bracket and get into our first quadrant here. As you know, we got 16 teams, or 16 competitors, I should say, and we're going to break that up into 4 subgroups here. We're going to work through each quadrant, and then we're going to get to the finals, including a true third playoff. So we've got John Calvin's The Institutes of the Christian Religion versus Joel Beeke's Puritan Theology. Then we're going to have Gerhardus Voss's Reformed Dogmatics versus Herman Bavinck's Reformed Dogmatics, battle of the same name here. And in this first battle, it's unfortunately not really much of a choice because although I really like Joel Beeke's Puritan Theology, I've benefited from it. Every chapter has some really great resources for studying the Puritans. I really like Beeke's ability to source quotations. We're going to see that too in his Reformed Systematic Theology multi-volume set. But Beeke is just the man at combing through old Puritan works and finding just the most elucidating quotations. But unfortunately, as much as I like that book, he ran into a buzzsaw here in the first round with John Calvin. I don't think Calvin's going to be easy to upset here. And as far as the dogmatics versus dogmatics work, though I really like Gerhardus Voss, we're going to go ahead and put Herman Bavinck through in this particular round. Now, let me say a kind word about Gerhardus Voss. His Reformed Dogmatics just came out, and you say to yourself, well, wait, he's been dead for quite a while, hasn't he? Well, yeah, actually, this is kind of an interesting one because while his biblical theology is very well known in certain Reformed circles, his systematic theology actually just came into print not too terribly long ago because basically what happened is that his notes for theology class, which he taught at Princeton, and did he teach at Westminster too? Correct me in the comments, I'm sure I've got this wrong. Anyways, his notes from class recently surfaced, and thanks to a few good stenographers and basically editors, brought it into a final form, first in the 5-volume set of his notes, and then now also in a 1-volume Reformed Dogmatics by Gerhardus Voss. Really great stuff. I think it's great. A lot of it's question and answer style, and you get the sense that you're in the classroom with Gerhardus Voss because a lot of it is him posing a question to his students and then answering it with 4 or 5 or 7 points or something like that. So it's an interesting way to learn, and it's very, very readable. But as it relates to this next matchup between John Calvin and Herman Bavinck, of course, we're going to go ahead and put Calvin through in this round. He's just going to be a buzzsaw for anybody to face, I think, because of the importance of the Institutes. But don't sleep on Herman Bavinck's Reformed Dogmatics as well. Now, I own the abridged in 1-volume sets, but please know that this is an expanded series, actually, of 4 or 5 volumes, I think it is. I don't have the multi-volume set. I have the 1-volume. And honestly, though there are certain people who love Bavinck, they think that he is basically the creme de la creme. He is the cream of the crop as far as the Dutch Reformed systematicians go. I've always found him to be a little bit wordy, and I find other writers get straight to the point a little faster. And when I'm looking for information, especially in the development of a sermon or a lecture series or something like that, I kind of just want my systematic theologian to give me the stuff, right? And so sometimes Bavinck is just a little slow and wordy in the development. And so for me, the winner of this quadrant round is definitely going to be John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. Now let's go on to our next quadrant here. We're going to have Wayne Grudem, John Frame, Charles Hodge, and Francis Turretin in this particular round. And even as I look at this bracket, it strikes me as somewhat interesting because look at this. We've got the two contemporary guys. These two guys are still living today, Grudem versus Frame. I did not do this on purpose. Versus on the bottom set, Hodge versus Turretin, both of which who've been dead for some time, though Hodge is obviously more recent than Turretin, who followed up John Calvin at the Geneva Academy. But as it relates to this first matchup, I'm going to put John Frame through, not only because he was my professor at RTS, the Reformed Theological Seminary of Orlando, but also because Wayne Grudem has stumbled lately as far as some of his controversies. Grudem got into this debate on the eternal subordination of the Son about 10 years or so now. And though he was corrected, I think, by a lot of other Reformed theologians, he nevertheless kind of dug in his heels at this point, and a lot of his systematic theology fell out of favor at that time. So too also his controversy with complementarianism. He tried to root that doctrine, which is true, I think, unfortunately, in his eternal subordination of the Son, which is not true, and he got himself into further trouble thence-wise. Nevertheless, I did love Grudem when I was in college. It really has an endearing place for me, even though I have ended up disagreeing with him a lot of things. So for instance, I don't take his believer's baptism view and I don't take his charismatic views, yet he does hold to the doctrines of grace as it relates to election and so forth. But John Frame is going to win this round for me because John Frame's systematic theology is eminently readable. I mean, this thing is probably the most readable book in this entire tournament. I love John Frame's writing style, and I agree with him on a lot more things that I do with Grudem. Okay, so I'm putting Frame through here. Now, as it relates to Turretin versus Hodge, man, this is a tough first round matchup. And again, maybe I should have seeded this tournament because these are two warriors, two venerable Presbyterian theologians having, unfortunately, to do combat in the very first round. But I'm going to put Turretin through. And the reason, though, they're both 3-volume sets, and Turretin is harder to read than Hodge for more modern readers, his work is just probably better in terms of being all-encompassing. Now, please don't sleep on Hodge. His 3-volume set you can get for a reasonable price in hardback. Is it Baker or is it Hendrickson? I forget at the moment. Let's check. It's Hendrickson. He sometimes slips into Latin. There's a lot of Latin quotations which you can just skim right over. But Hodge does a very good job of summarizing the high Presbyterian Princetonian view as good as anybody else. But in this round, it's going to be Francis Turretin. And Turretin's going to beat Frame too. Now, I should say a little bit more about John Frame. Frame is great. Now, there are some things that I don't like about Frame. For instance, his views on the regulative principle have sometimes been thought to be out of step with the larger Reformed movement. For instance, he finds a broader place in Reformed worship for things like drama, which I think would be totally inappropriate. His Christian ethics, I think, are very, very helpful. Frame has definitely come into some controversies with other Reformed theologians, but in my view, he is a humble, gracious man, and I have really, really benefited from practically everything that John Frame has written, though I do occasionally disagree with him. But it's hard to see Turretin losing in this round, just because truly this is one of a handful of Reformed systematic theologies that has earned its way to be one of the most reliable systematic theologies that there is. So we're going to pass on Turretin to the semifinals, or to the quarterfinals, I suppose. Okay, next round. We've got Jonathan Edwards, my man. And here we're going to enter his book called History of Redemption, which is not technically a systematic theology, but for reasons I'll explain in just a moment, we're going to put him in, versus Louis Berkhof's Systematic Theology. And then on the bottom side of the bracket, we've got Michael Horton's Christian Faith versus Petrus Van Maastricht's Practical Theoretical Theology. And here, what do you think I'm going to do with Edwards versus Berkhof? What do you think I'm going to do? You ready? You want to call it? It's Berkhof. Now, that may surprise you, but that's for two reasons. One, Berkhof is such a great handbook. I mean, brevity, clarity, succinctness, nobody beats Berkhoff. It's one of the best books in this tournament. And Edwards' History of Redemption could have been something so much better than it is, but unfortunately he died before completing it. Those of you who follow my Edwards work may already know this, that Edwards had intentions to combine systematic theology with biblical theology with church history into one incredible volume that was going to try to do everything. He was going to do systematics, biblical theology, the order of redemption, through the basically the redemptive historical order in Scripture, and then tying it into church history would have been marvelous, but he died, so he did not complete that. So Berkhoff wins this round. Now, Horton's a decent book too, though he's a little bit more two kingdoms than I would prefer. And so I'm going to put through Petrus Van Maastricht in this round. Horton, though, is readable. If anything, he strays a little bit too much into historical theology. He wants to always tell you what Luther and Calvin and other theologians think, often combating Roman Catholic views as he goes. It's a little bit less kind of just like a straight up tell me what Reformed people believe, like Berkhoff may be. So if these two had gone against each other, I would have picked Berkhoff. But in this round, it's going to be Petrus Van Maastricht. Now here, jumping into the next stage of the tournament, though, Berkhoff is going to make it. And it's not for lack of love for PVM. PVM is my guy. PVM, by the way, was Edwards' favorite theologian. Edwards thought that PVM's work, Theoretical Practical Theology, was the best work that had ever been written on systematic theology. Only reason I'm not putting it through now is because it's still coming out in its editions. There are several of them out right now, but it's not yet fully baked at this time, and I really need to read through it more. I will tell you this. I love PVM. I love his format. He's got the best fourfold format for every doctrine. He does an exegetical section, states the doctrine positively, and then he refutes opposing views, and then finally he has some of the best practical applications in any systematic theology anywhere. Whenever I read PVM, I cannot wait to get to his applications because they're heartwarming and warm and pious. But nevertheless, Berkhoff makes it through. It's just one of those desert island books that if I could only have one, I would probably take Berkhoff. Okay, next round. Here we go. We got Joel Beeke's Reformed Systematic Theology set. We've got A.A. Hodge's Evangelical Theology. We've got William Ames's Marrow of Theology and John Murray's 4-volume set of works, which again technically isn't a systematic theology, though there's enough in there, and he has a volume on systematic theology that we're going to count it for this round. Now, first matchup here is an easy one for me. This is a clubbing. This is a beating. This is a mauling in the first round here. Joel Beeke's set is the stuff. This is so good. The 4-volume set here from Beeke is just incredible. It's going to be tough to beat Beeke all the way through, and we're going to talk more about Beeke. Hodge's Evangelical Theology, I like it, okay, but whenever I read it, I find it a little bit stiff and wooden, and I almost immediately put it away to try to find something a little bit more clear. So while he was a helpful Princetonian theologian, as several of these guys are, it's not really a competition here. Beeke is the one if I'm going to have to pick one here in this round. Now, Ames versus Murray is another tough one for me, because I really, really like John Murray. I find him very readable, but I've got to go with William Ames. And you might not have read William Ames before. You probably should. Here's why. William Ames was the theologian that most of these theologians were reading. He was the standard Puritan textbook. In fact, he was what you would have read if you were a colonial Puritan Calvinist, if you went to Harvard or Yale or Princeton in the early years. This is what guys like Jonathan Edwards would have been reading. Cotton Mather would have been reading this. Solomon Stoddard would have been reading this. The Marrow of Theology at this time was considered the theological textbook for training pastors. Now, I like it. And what I like about it is that every chapter, it's not written like a smooth, coherent chapter. It's a series of punctiliar statements. So he'll take any doctrine, like let's say the divinity of Christ, and he'll reduce it to 25 to 35 statements that students were expected to learn and understand and memorize. So you can see where this is a textbook for the classroom in which many a great Puritan Reformed theologian was taught. But unfortunately, as great as Ames was then, If they would have had Beeke then, they probably would have really liked Beeke too, because Beeke is just incredible set. The only weakness that Beeke has, in my view, is that there isn't really a very clear table of contents that helps you to find passages. That's a real problem they're going to have to fix in later editions. But everything he writes, clear, smooth, highly intelligible, right to the point, though a little long-winded at times, with tons of quotations from the Puritans and other reformers. Man, this book is a beast. It's great, and I love it. Okay, so here's where we are at the moment. Let's just review. Calvin beat the play-in. Herman Bavinck won over Voss. Frame beat Grudem. Turretin beat Hodge. Burkhoff beat Edwards. PVM beat Horton. Beeke beat Hodge. Ames beat Murray. And then making it into the semifinals, we have Calvin, Turretin, Burkhoff, and Joel Beeke. So where would you put these four right now? If this tournament was only a four-man bracket, who do you have winning? Well, let's get into the finals here. And the first thing we're going to say is that Calvin's going to beat Turretin. And I hate to say that because Turretin is so great, but it's just impossible to beat John Calvin. For one, John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion was undoubtedly the most important book in the entire Protestant Reformation, bar none. Now, there's a lot of other important books. Luther's Bondage of the Will, for instance. Several of the catechisms that came out of the Reformation era are very important. If you even want to expand it out to some of the confessional documents that came out during that time, even expanding as far as the Westminster Confession of Faith, let's go all the way into the 1600s. Calvin is still the most important book that came out of the entire Reformation era, period, bar none. So Calvin's going to be Turretin, even though Turretin was actually Calvin's successor at the Genevan Academy. Turretin's great too, but I'm sorry he does not win this round. And as far as our other matchup, man, it does it hurt me to put Burkhoff underneath of Beeke, because Beeke's so new, it just came out. It has not stood the test of time yet, but all indications are Beeke is going to stand the test of time and is going to be a mammoth, incredible, valiant defense of the Reformed tradition for years to come. But if I have to go third place here, Turretin versus Burkhoff, please forgive me for doing this, but I'm going to put Burkhoff. And I know Turretin is one of the best. I know this, but we're talking the finals here. This is the true third matchup. And for me, I've got to ask myself a question. If I could only afford one for my office, thankfully I have them both, but if I could only afford one, who am I really going to get? Answer has got to be Burkhoff. It's got to be Burkhoff. He's just so usable. Honestly, if this book could fit in my pocket, it can't. But if it did, I would carry it around in my pocket because it's just the field book. It's the field guide for Reformed theology. I love it so much. And that brings us to our finals. And this is a very interesting finals. And again, what would have happened if I would have seeded this tournament, if I would have laid it out differently? Maybe these two titans might have met each other earlier in the tournament. Who knows? But as it stands, look at this matchup. We've got the best thing of modern day versus the best thing of Reformed history. Who are you going to put? For me, Calvin. Calvin. Now, I've got to just clarify. This is an important question. Is it the desert island question of what would I have if I could only have one? Or is the question the most important work of history? Because those are two different questions. And again, like, go back to my analogy of sushi. I want them both. I want to try it all. I want it all on my plate. But Calvin's going to win here because of his long-standing historical influence. And if it was a desert island question and I could only have one as a pastor, let's say I'm a church planter in Timbuktu or whatever, and I only can get one of these in my suitcase, I'm going to sneak in Beeke because it's a 4-volume set and it's so much easier to read, right? Really applicable. But here's the reason why Calvin's the champion. Because every single one of these systematic theologies that I mentioned in the entire tournament depends on him. They literally do. Every single one of all of these systematic theologies that I showed you earlier depend very, very heavily on John Calvin, and therefore his influence simply cannot be denied. Well, that's how I did it in my bracket tournament. I'd love to hear your corrections. You can tell me everything I got wrong in this tournament. I'd love to hear your opinions. Again, a couple of reminders. I just want to remind you of Biblingo. If you're interested in learning the biblical languages, this is a great place to do it. There's a discount code. Just scroll down in the description of this video. But I also have to tell you, too, I'm going to post some Amazon links to these theological textbooks, all of these great ones in the description of this video, so you can just go down, toggle down, and grab any one of them you want. Thank you so much for watching this video. You know I love you lots, and I'll talk to you later.